Hello! I love brewing mead. I've brewed it maybe once every couple of years for the last 10 years. I really love sharing it with people, but not all of my friends can drink something made with honey, so I decided the next time I brewed it, I would also experiment with something they could have. Whatever I made, I certainly wouldn't call mead at all, but I wanted it to fulfill the same things that mead does for me and that makes it special. Something nostalgic. The idea of a hillside of blossoms condensed into a bottle. I had 3 candidates: agave syrup, maple syrup, and golden syrup. I decided against maple syrup because maple wine is already its own glorious thing. Agave syrup is also very close to what I could use. Many people have had wonderful results making it into wine, but it feels like a really safe bet. This leaves me with golden syrup. Now, golden syrup is literally just invert sugar syrup, but it's got such a distinctive flavour that reminds me of warm flapjacks cooling on the counter on a cold December day in the snow. So for all the fact that it's just processed sugar, I think it does the job. Also, I need more paint pots. The lovely people at the Happy Homestead on YouTube have made a golden syrup wine in 2018. Their conclusions were that the syrup wine it lacked body. I decided to add dried heather flowers to mine, which should hopefully give the final thing a hint of floral peaty interest and also fulfill my requirement of capturing the idea of a whole hillside in a bottle. I did of course also make real mead with heather honey. The method I'm using to brew my mead and my not mead was written by Arlea Æðelwyrd Hunt-Anschütz, whose name I have probably ruined. I've been carefully making mead to their recipe for the last decade. So without further ado, I'm going to show you exactly what I did and what happened while I was making it. Then a couple of months later, when I racked it, that is removing all of the sediment that builds up in the bottom of the demijohn, and show you how I got from several jars of honey and golden syrup to my baby and my other baby. Anyway.
First, sterilize all your gear. I use VWP. I sterilize everything in my plastic fermentation vat, which is nice and non-reactive. You'll need a funnel, an airlock for every demijohn you're using, plus a drilled cork that fits the demijohn, a ladle, a measuring jug, a thermometer, and this is a Polish cheese-making thermometer, and a 1-pint bottle with a neck that fits your cork for your airlock. I just sterilize my demijohns by filling them with the fluid made up to the manufacturer's instructions.
I can't afford real music.
Next, we want to make a starter solution to let our yeast wake up. So I took 2 or 3 tablespoons of heather honey and stirred them into 1 pint of freshly boiled water. The really cool thing about heather honey is that the protein content makes it what's called a thixotropic liquid, which means it's a gel when it's still, but then when you stir it, it suddenly becomes runny again. And this was extremely fun to play with. The solution needs to cool down to about 27 degrees Celsius, otherwise it'll be too hot for our yeast to survive. Then I did exactly the same thing with the golden syrup. Next, I boiled 2/3 of a gallon of water. I stirred in 1 teaspoon of citric acid, and I didn't show you this, but I did sterilize the teaspoon beforehand. And then I added 3 whole pounds of heather honey. Then I left that to cool for ages until it reached 27 degrees Celsius. When my starter solution finally reached 27 degrees Celsius, it was time to add the yeast. I used Bulldog mead yeast, which contains nutrient, but if you're just using regular yeast, you will need to add a teaspoon of nutrient as well as your approximately 1 teaspoon of mead yeast. Stir it well with a clean implement and then put the airlock on. Leave it in a warm place, and in about 2 or 3 hours, you'll soon start to see little bubbles of your yeast waking up and producing carbon dioxide. Meanwhile, I ladled my honey mixture into my demijohn, which hopefully will let it cool down a little bit quicker than just leaving it in the hot pot. I did the same thing with the golden syrup, and I left them on the side to admire the sunlight filtering through the glass. I I flavoured my golden syrup mixture using 50 grams of dried heather flowers which I got from the home brew shop. I poured boiling water over them and let them infuse as the mixture came to a boil on the hob. Then, just as before, I poured in 3 whole pounds of golden syrup, which is conveniently 3 tins. I was going to film that, but... As the sun started to set, the yeast started to wake up. You can see the big grains, they're not individual yeast cells, they're large numbers of yeast cells, starting to rise and float to the top as they're producing carbon dioxide. And then the heavens opened. Once I was warm and dry again, my mixture had finally reached 27 degrees Celsius, so it was safe to pour my yeast starter in. I got distracted by the weather, which was steadily getting worse and worse and worse. I put the airlock on, and like every time I make mead, I took a little moment to just stand with it there. And then once I've done being weird, I'll set it aside. I then repeated the whole process with the golden syrup.
It smells of something.
And as I left them on the side to cool down, the sun finally set, and the night brought its own little bit of magic. The golden syrup didn't finally cool down enough until 1 AM. And being a drama queen, I thought that during a thunderstorm was the perfect time to do the last bit by candlelight. And I know it's just invert sugar syrup, but I really believe that if you pour love into something, you do get that love back. And I wanted to take as much love and care with this as I did their real mead. And then, at long last, it was finally time to put their labels on and sit them safe on a shelf, little golden lochs gently bubbling in their dreams. Dreaming of what, as I dreamed of campfires and bonfires. In October, it was time to rack off the thick layer of sediment that had gathered on the bottom of the demijohns. I boiled my siphon for a few minutes to sterilize it. Then, placing my gallon pot on a chair and my demijohns on the counter above it, I was able to siphon the liquid carefully from one into the other, leaving the sediment on the bottom. I washed out the demijohns with lots of clean water and then reversed the process. I topped my demijohns up with boiled water that had cooled down to room temperature so as to leave as little airspace in the top as possible. Then they returned to their beds on the shelf to mature and mellow until such time as bonfires and joy could be had and shared with them.
So I hope you found that interesting, and I hope you found the thunderstorm as magical as I did. Take care of yourself, and be safe. Bye.